Hi, I don't know if you've ever heard of a timeline before, but using a timeline can be a great way to help you get through your breakup. So today I'm going to teach you how to use a timeline so that you can begin to make sense of your experience. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but sometimes when we're going through a breakup, we have a few key memories that we just kind of regurgitate or keep on rehashing, re-going through, but it never really takes us anywhere. We just kind of sit there and then the time passes and then it's going to come around again and then you go through it again. But when you do something like a timeline, it actually takes all of the information and it helps your brain be able to make sense of what you've just gone through. So all this is coming from I Can't Believe How Much This Hurts. It's available on Amazon. This is what it looks like. Also, there is a full course available on relationaltrauma101.podia.com. So let's get into how to do a timeline. There's lots of different ways you could do a timeline. You could make it as fantastic or as simplistic as you want. You could do something called a continuum. You just write a line and you do little tick marks along it and you write down your most important memories. So you want to look for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Any memory that comes up, chances are it has some sort of significance, which is why it's coming out during the exercise. So make sure you write that down. Another thing you can do is just use bullet points. I'm actually going to show you an example of someone, or talk to you about an example of a timeline, and it's just using bullet points. So you're just going to sit down to do your timeline, make a bullet point, and then you're going to write the memory that comes up for you and the way you felt in that moment. Then you're going to go to your next memory. So, and then what happened? Write down that memory and the way you felt about it. If at any time it becomes overwhelming, you could just take a break and you can always come back to it when you're ready. If it's too overwhelming, then you want to find someone in your local area, like a therapist. If money is a barrier, which I know a lot of times it is to getting therapy, if you have a university in your area that has a counseling program, a lot of times their students, when they get ready to graduate, when they're getting their hours, they provide free counseling to the community. So check with your local universities to see if they have a counseling program that offers free therapy to the community. Or you could also check with your county departments. A lot of times they have programs or they know of programs that receive funding to offset the price of counseling. So it could just go by your income, or sometimes you don't have to pay anything. Or you could go to something like psychologytoday.com. If you're a student, a lot of universities provide therapy to their students, so you can check with the counseling office at your university to see if they have counselors available. Okay, so now back to the exercise. But just be mindful of how you're feeling as you're going and doing this work, so that if it's too much, just take a break. And sometimes you'll need to stop altogether for a period of time, and sometimes you just need a minute. And you know what? Wherever you're at, it's okay. So when you're doing the bullet points, it's really important to get what were you doing right before you met this person? What was going on in your life? Maybe you just moved. Maybe you and your friend were fighting. Maybe you just got kicked out of your house. I mean, who knows what could have been happening? But it's important to start what happened before, and then you're going to do how you met the person, and then what happened, and then what happened, and then what happened. And then as you get to the end, what are you doing next week? So you always want to have on your timeline outside of the moment on either end. So your brain has exits. So that's what we're going to try to do, is create exits for our brain to go. To realize, oh, I had a life before this. I have a life after. And yes, some stuff in here may be gross or bad or painful, but I'm not there. I'm now out here, right? Okay, so let me walk you through an example from the book. This is on page, it's all in chapter 4. The entire chapter is about a timeline, but it starts on page 19. So this person's experience, she just did the bullet points. And the first one was, I had moved to a new state to start a new job. How is she feeling? Alone. So that's the other part. Make sure you write how you felt in that moment. So for her, we can already see she started off this relationship feeling a bit vulnerable and a bit lonely, right? Because she just moved to a new state. This was a new job. So she was very much not on her own territory. So that gives us a lot of information, right? She's probably feeling pretty vulnerable getting into this. So how about you? Where did you start at before you got into this relationship? And by the way, it doesn't matter how long or how recently ago you started or ended this relationship. Even if it's been years, it could have been 10 years ago and you're just now doing your timeline because you're finding you're not getting over this person. This will still work. Maybe it hasn't been that long. It doesn't matter. It will still work. So it's all going to help you get to where you're ultimately going to end up, right? So it's a good exercise to do, excuse me, when you're ready. Okay, so her next one. I first saw him at work. He was in the break room. I was sitting at my desk and curious, right? So she was like, oh, who's this person? Then went to a restaurant with coworkers. He sat by me excited. So now we're seeing, oh, okay, so she was feeling vulnerable and alone. She started a new job in a new state. Then she noticed him. She felt curious. Then they all went out to eat. He sat by her, started getting excited. So now we're seeing, okay, so this is how the relationship started. So then she would keep going. Any significant memory that comes up, she's going to write it down and write the emotion. I sometimes see clients write great big stories about every moment. You're never going to finish your timeline if you do that. So you really want to make sure, like hers, it was just like a quick sentence, short, sweet, to the point, right? Moved to a new state, started a new job, felt alone. That's just very brief, to the point. She remembers all the memories that go with that, but in a nutshell, that's what she was going through in that moment. So try to keep it a bit brief, but make sure you try to kind of get the emotion the best you can remember, or even if you can kind of go back and imagine how you must have been feeling, right? So you're going to go through the whole thing, and then on the end, what are you doing next week? Because we want an exit from the memories, right? And then on page 20 from I Can't Believe How Much This Hurts, you want to answer these questions. So you're going to use the timeline that you just made to be able to answer these questions. So that's where you're taking the information from. So I'm just going to read you a couple of them. The first one is, so this is after you've done your timeline. Let me back up, sorry. After you get through your timeline, this is so important. So you read it out loud if you have privacy. If not, maybe whisper it or just read it in your head if you have to. But the best I find is to try and read it out loud. And then you're going to read it again, and then you're going to read it again. So you're going to do it 3 times. So once you write it all down, just without taking a beat or skipping anything, you're just going to read through it, stop, go back, read through it, and you're going to do that 3 times in a row. And it's amazing. Most people really feel a shift in their emotion and the way they attach to the different memories when you read it all the way through 3 times. It starts to put things into perspective. It's pretty cool. So that's another important step. So after you do the timeline, read through it 3 times in a row, out loud if you're able. And it's not always easy because sometimes there's like embarrassing things on there or shameful things on there, which is why it's best to do it when you're in a private space, when you're able to do that and have some privacy. And like I said, if not, just kind of whisper out loud or just go through it in your head, but go through the whole thing 3 times without stopping. Hopefully I've made that completely clear. Okay, so here's one of the questions that you can find on page 20. Did anything in the timeline surprise you? So after you've read through it 3 times, chances are there's something on there that you may have just totally forgotten or really didn't seem as significant as maybe you're finding now, or maybe something you thought was super significant. Now you're like, I don't really care about that anymore. So it doesn't matter. There's no wrong answer. Just for you, now that you're reflecting and looking back over the timeline, is there anything on there that's surprising to you? Next question. What did you learn about yourself after looking at the timeline? So now you're going to look at you. After you read through this 3 times, are you learning anything more about yourself after reading about your own experience? So a lot of time we can call that like the wise mind or the wise part of ourselves, right? Where we can kind of look at how we're acting or look at what we're thinking. That's why the timeline's another really cool tool, because it helps you to be able to do that. And now you learn something about yourself. So what did you learn, or did you learn something about yourself? And if so, what? And then you're going to write about it. The next one, what did you learn about the relationship? So having gone through this exercise, is there anything new that stands out to you that you learned about your relationship? Is there anything, maybe you didn't realize where you were at before you started the relationship, or maybe you didn't realize where you were at when it ended, or maybe you didn't realize how many times this same thing kept happening until you've had this chance to take a look at the timeline and go through it again. So that's just an exercise. It is called a timeline. It works and is so great for so many things, but it's really good for helping our brain to organize memory and see it all as it occurred instead of just fragmented parts of it, right? Because it's really hard to make sense of fragments and pieces. But when we pull it all together on that timeline, then we're able to just look at it and then we can make sense of it and decide where we're going to move it. So I hope you found this helpful. Remember, you can go to relationaltrauma101.podia.com. There you can also find the book and the course, or just go to Amazon to get the book. Take good care and good luck getting through your breakup.